High Guardian Spice is a wonderful story about a group of young girls learning to be guardians, and I must admit that I have never watched something so incredible in my entire life, because this series has its characters, story, and animation all absolutely mastered. After all, how could you make something this incredible if you didn't? Well, you wouldn't be able to, which is why I'm completely and utterly lying to you, and this show isn't the masterpiece that I've made it out to be so far. In fact, it is one of the worst shows I have ever sat through, but at the same time, I thoroughly enjoyed my experience. So here I am to talk about it, and without any further ado, let's begin talking about the insanity that is High Guardian Spice. Okay, so before we actually discuss the show itself, I want to start by talking about the opening and ending for the series, because I like to consider myself a big opening connoisseur, and seeing as I'm going to talk about the opening, I may as well give the ending a once-over as well. So let's start with the opening, which is just weird, because first, this is an American anime, which means that obviously the opening is going to be in English, and this is completely fine, because I don't think that any anime-like series not made in Japan is bad, but after listening to the opening for about 20 seconds, I already think I'm in for a wild ride, because the lyrics of this opening are some of the most corny lyrics I have ever heard. And just to give you an idea of how bad we're talking here, I'll just quickly recite some of them for you. All of our dreams will soon come true, if we only try. All of our hopes come shining through, just look into my eyes. And let's be honest, corny lyrics would be completely fine if this wasn't supposed to be a mature show for mature audiences. Yep, let me repeat that, it's for mature audiences, despite the bright colour palette and oftentimes sweeter than cotton candy-like adventures. It's for mature audiences, so am I lying to you about this show? Have we got a Petscop sort of situation on our hands? Well, no, I'm not. The reason that this is supposedly for mature audiences is because sometimes they say swear words, and on occasion they even get injured or kill monsters, which can lead to a minuscule amount of bloodshed, and that does sound sort of mature, but when you compare this series to some other series on Crunchyroll, you'll wonder why this show got a maturity warning and those didn't. But does it really matter? Is there a point for me bringing this up? Well, yes, because this show has no idea what it wants to be, as it's sometimes a show that wouldn't be too out of place on Nickelodeon, and then they just sprinkle a little bit of swearing and blood on the top, and it's suddenly a show for adults. But what adults are actually going to want to watch this? Because I certainly don't know any. However, that aside, I'm just going to go back to picking this opening apart for a moment, as there is still a little left I need to discuss for this opening, because we see a sliding still of a ton of different characters, and this would be somewhat cool because a lot of them have unique designs. However, out of those 38 characters that appear, only 7 of them have voice lines, and one of those 7 only had one line. So for some reason, they have just stuck a bunch of background characters in the intro for no apparent reason aside from the fact that they can, but that is about all I want to say for the opening, so I'm going to go ahead and quickly talk about the ending, which is just a bunch of nothing. There are some slightly cute and decently well-animated chibi clips of the 4 main characters, but aside from that, it's just a slideshow. A well-drawn slideshow, but a slideshow nonetheless, with again, pretty corny lyrics for again, a mature show. But at this point, I really don't know what I expect from either of these, so let's just move on, shall we? Because I'm yet to even discuss the show itself. So I should probably do that, right? Alright, so here we are, finally talking about the legend that is High Guardian Spice, and I'm going to focus on 3 specific things, those being the writing, characters, and voice acting, but I'm not going to talk in depth on the animation and instead just say that it isn't very good, so that I can move on and start talking about the writing, which if I'm being honest is just bad, but why? Well, there's a lot, so if you're not already comfortable, I suggest getting comfy, because it's time for a synopsis. Here I go. High Guardian Spice is a show where 4 girls named Rosemary, Sage, Parsley, and Thyme all attempt to be guardians at High Guardian Academy, but there's something dangerous in the shadows named the Rot that could affect the fairy woods. Now, there is a few problems with this, and I'm going to start with the funniest one, and that's the issue with the names of our 4 main characters, who are supposed to be named after spices, because it's called High Guardian Spice. But a few Google searches and you can prove that none of those are spices. They're all herbs. So maybe there was some sort of confusion when making this? I really don't know. But moving on, because we still have a lot to discuss, like, what is a guardian? Well, you'd think I'd be able to explain, but in reality that's not the case, because they never actually explain what a guardian is. Throughout the series, not even once do they try and explain. Perhaps we're just supposed to assume what it is, based on what we see, which could have been a decent attempt of show don't tell, if they didn't just show random stuff, like dance and sword fighting, which will apparently both help you become a guardian, so maybe a guardian is just whatever the hell you want it to be? But anyways, moving on, because it's time to talk about the Rot, which is the big thing in the series that's dangerous, but I don't have a clue why. Maybe because it's threatening the fairy woods, but what are the fairy woods, and why are they important? Because Thyme used to live there? Doesn't make it important though. Maybe if we got some more backstory for Thyme and how she's connected to the fairy woods, maybe I'd care more, but at the moment, the Rot is just a thing that sounds bad. But if you think all of what I've discussed prior is bad, you do not know nothing yet, because the magic system in this series is just stupid, because you have old magic and new magic. Old magic is bad, and you're a real doofus if you use that shit, but you're a cool kid if you use new magic, because that's based. But how do either of them work? Well, old magic seems to be done with magic circles and whatnot, whilst new magic is used via a staff. How are the staffs made? I don't know, silly. Because nothing's explained in this series, but guess what? You can do anything with new magic, and I mean anything. Apparently, new magic can just do whatever, whenever. Why? Because it can, so there. Anyways, my brain already turned to slime at this point, so let's just move on and talk about some characters. Starting with my favourites, who are Parsley and Parnell, neither of which being great, but they're the best of a bad bunch. Parnell because he's just a lovable little goofball and only exists for the sole purpose of comedic relief and making other characters feel better about themselves, and Parsley just because she's kind of funny at points and she helps Parnell win a trophy, so that's nice. But unlike Parsley and Parnell, this series does not have a lot of good characters. Like, even the main character is bad, as the one thing you want in a series like this is for the main character to at least be likable. But she's an asshole, if anything, that constantly causes trouble for the people around her, even almost cutting one of the other main characters' heads off in the first episode by violently swinging her sword around, and then acting as if the other character was in the wrong for being upset. That isn't a quirky, relatable character, that's a dickhead. And I'll give Rosemary this, she does get a little better throughout the series, unlike her best friend Sage, who just gets angry at her for getting hurt, but let's be honest, this was only so the writers could find a way to have Rosemary, Sage, and a side character called Snapdragon in a love triangle, which will never have a resolution because there is no chance that this series is going to get a season 2, and if you're wondering about Thyme, I can sum her character up in a few words. My life bad. Anyways, moving on to the villains, who aren't much better, really. In fact, the first one introduced is a cat girl, and hey, I'm a Felix enjoyer, but this just wasn't good, even in the slightest. And this girl swaps between psycho killer and, oh, but I don't actually hurt people so fast, and I just don't care. When it really comes down to it, she's just bland. And why in the world did it take until episode 8 to actually make her a villain instead of just a background cat? And by the way, they don't build up her character at all when she's in the background, except for maybe one time when she stares at one of the characters for a bit too long. But moving on, because we still need to discuss the voice acting, which is, as usual with this show, not good, because a good portion of the voice actors in this series must have been half awake when making this, or they were just absolutely blazed, as these guys sound sleepy. But that wasn't the case for the entire cast. It's just a lot of them had very bad line delivery, and maybe if they were given a better script, that would have helped as well. However, that is all I want to say on voice acting, because some of it was pretty decent, just not a lot of it. Anyways, it's time for my final verdict. So, in conclusion, it's no secret that High Guardian Spice isn't great, but again, there were parts that I did enjoy, like the relationship between two side characters called Snapdragon and Amaryllis that really stole the show from time to time, and as I said before, Parsley is actually quite a fun character that I have pretty much zero problems with. But the series has so many issues, and I only talked about some of the bigger ones, when there are still so many more. Like how men are primarily made to look like the root of all evil in numerous occasions throughout the show, unless they are either trans or a cute little guy like Parnell. But you know, I think the main reason for that is the fact that Kate Leff was a writer, and after doing some research on them, they're pretty interesting, that's for sure. As you can find some old tweets of theirs about how all men should die, but obviously don't send any hate their way because that's just not Let Epic Funny Gamer Moments montage. But even so, if they are the cause of some of these scenes, I have to wonder how they did this. Because even in scenes where it is basically someone admitting that they are trans, they still manage to upset trans people. That's when you screwed up. And you know I can completely see why trans people would be upset by this scene I'm referring to, as it makes hormone replacement look like something you can do for free with a magical potion, when that is obviously not the case in real life, and you actually spend a lot of money, I believe. But hell, I could be talking out of my ass, because I don't really get how it all works, but the main point that I'm trying to make here is that even when this show is inclusive, which it is a lot, it still gets it wrong, as it does many times over. But again, I keep telling myself that it's not the worst thing I have ever watched, and even now I stand by that, because I did genuinely enjoy it. Maybe I just have a soft spot for corny little stories, or maybe the irony got to me so badly that I actually ended up enjoying unironically. But either way, if I had to rate High Guardian Spice out of 10, I would probably give it an astonishing 4 out of 10, which is probably far more than a lot of people would give it, but as I did enjoy it, I won't be sending it straight to the 9th circle of hell. Instead, I'll send it somewhere like the 5th. Wrath. Everybody loves a bit of wrath. But now that I've given it a rating, I want to quickly point out how this series affects Crunchyroll. Well, really, it doesn't, because Crunchyroll still has a lot of other good shows that people will still pay for a subscription to watch. But what it shows is that Crunchyroll, despite being an anime streaming service, knows next to nothing of what anime fans actually want. Instead, they make, well, what's basically an American cartoon with one of its main selling points in the original trailer being that they were giving equal opportunities to both men and women, which is why they only had women working on High Guardian Spice, which is ever so contradictory to the statement before, and proves that Crunchyroll would love nothing more than to pump stuff like High Guardian Spice out as if it were in mass production. After all, it's all about that ESG score, that lovely, lovely ESG score. You just gotta have it. But seeing as I currently feel like a podcast host that talks about how the world is flat and how the woke liberals are trying to take over the government, I'm just gonna go ahead and end this before I accidentally turn myself into a conservative. But hey, if you did enjoy this video, please make sure to smash that like button, leave a comment down below, and hit that big red subscribe button, because we are aiming for a total of 500 subs by the end of the year, and any help in that goal would be much appreciated. So just do it, because that would be a Let Epic Funny Gamer Moments montage. However, that is the end of the video, so goodbye to you lovely, lovely people.